Turks and Caicos. You are tuned to Disaster 365, aired on 89.1 FM, Radio Turks and Caicos, your trusted source for all things safety and preparedness. I am Alison Gordon, your host, and I'm the director at the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies. As we navigate through this hurricane season, it's crucial to stay informed, prepared, and proactive. That's why today we are thrilled to welcome a distinguished guest, Honorable Jamel Robinson, Deputy Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, and is the Minister of Physical Planning and Infrastructure Development, as well as the Portfolio Minister with responsibility for the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies. This show will form 2 episodes, which focus on understanding what steps our government is taking to protect us and what we as a community can do to support these efforts. We'll delve into strategic preparations for hurricane season, as well as the essential collaboration within National Emergency Operations Center and the vital role each of us play in disaster readiness. So, stay with us as we dive into these crucial topics with Deputy Premier, the Honorable Jamel Robinson, as we ensure that the Turks and Caicos Islands are not just surviving hurricanes, but thriving through preparedness and resilience. Honorable Deputy Premier, welcome to Disaster 365 Radio Show. We are excited to have you, and so let's start by discussing the primary focus of your ministry and how it integrates with disaster management.
Thank you, Alison, and hello, Turks and Caicos. It's good to be on Disaster 365 on Radio Turks and Caicos. So, what are the primary focus of my ministry and the integration with disaster management? Just a few things. We look at the development and enforcement of building codes and land use planning. Clearly, that is the Department of Planning that would take care of that, as well as to integrate disaster risk reduction into all stages of our physical planning processes. And of course, we would have a member of disaster management on my physical planning board to give that advice, so we ensure that any piece of infrastructure that we approve at the planning board level has some feedback given to the applicant via the disaster management department. And of course, we foster public awareness and education on disaster preparedness. And of course, the DDME is one of my departments within my ministry, and as I have responsibility for it. And last but not least, we definitely have the Public Works Department, which has responsibilities for the maintenance of our shelters, preparing our drains, and having responsibilities for response. And generally speaking, just as an aside, we would have had the opportunity to purchase a brand new building for the Department of Disaster Management, which will be the new EOC down here in Providencial Isles and our regular office working space. So you would see us hopefully being in that building just before the peak of this hurricane season. So those are some of the things that are the primary focus of my ministry with the integration of disaster management.
Thank you, Honorable Robinson. And as we continue the conversation, as the Deputy Premier and Minister of Physical Planning and Infrastructure Development, and you also have the responsibility for disaster management, could you share with our listeners your vision for disaster management here in the Turks and Caicos Islands?
Great question. And as an old National Disaster Management Coordinator, I have the privilege to actually be in position to help move the disaster management agenda forward in the Turks and Caicos Islands and the region by extension. We have an extensive vision for disaster management throughout the Turks and Caicos Islands. It starts off right away by strengthening our resilience through our comprehensive risk management strategies. So what does that entail? It entails supporting the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies in the development of our country work program. This is something that we have the resources for, and we're getting outside assistance to finalize this information over time so we can progress all of our initiatives to make disaster management better within and more integrated within the Turks and Caicos Islands. This is something that isn't necessarily new, but given the evolving times we're in when it comes to hazardous events, this is something that you have to refresh every few years, so you make sure you can keep ahead of the times of things happening in disaster management. Secondly, you have enhanced community involvement and preparedness at all levels. Clearly, disaster management is everybody's business. It's not about TCIG alone. It's not about the Ministry of Infrastructure alone. It's not about the DDME alone. We can only have successes in our response, preparedness, mitigation efforts, and hopefully not recovery efforts, but if it comes to that recovery efforts, if we have an engaged and involved community. So we definitely will be rolling out programs and continue to roll out programs to ensure that we have community enhancement and involvement. So what else are we doing? What else are we thinking about? Leveraging technology. We're in the digital age for some time now, and if you haven't done so as yet, please go to your app store, whatever that may be on whatever device you're on, and download the DDME Alert app. It's very important because as we get further into the hurricane season, that's where you can get all of your updates on whatever is happening, and I'm sure we probably have it integrated with the National Weather Service, so you can get your weather updates as well as tips on where your shelters are likely to be, flood prone areas, etc., etc. And of course, drone technology. Why walk and see an area when you can just fly over and get a sense from it from indoors, so you can have an idea where are the key areas you need to respond to. And of course, investment in radar technology and fully equipping our weather services and early warning systems. And again, this is something that we are seeking resources from throughout the region through CDB, SEDEMA, and all those organizations that assist the Turks and Caicos and other stakeholders throughout the region with improving those types of systems. Because of course, as soon as we can get our early warning systems in place, particularly for earthquake and tsunami type responses, the better, because of course a hurricane is a slow onset type hazard, so you usually get enough advance warning, but that's not every hazard. Even though we're in hurricane season, we have to be mindful of all hazards, and of course strengthening our regional and international partnerships to improve our response and recovery. And as previously mentioned a few seconds ago, SEDEMA, CDB, and all of the USAIDs and all of the stakeholders throughout the region and over time that has assisted the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I'll take this time to say thank you.
Perfectly said, Honorable Robinson. As we're currently in the hurricane season, can you please share with us some of the strategic activities that your ministry and departments have undertaken or are undertaken in ensuring that preparedness is at its optimum right across the Turks and Caicos Islands?
Another great question, Alison. Some of the strategic activities that we've undertaken for preparedness ahead of and during the hurricane season. We have our regular monthly state of preparedness meetings to get updates on our level of preparedness, as well as we've engaged in community drills, hazard tabletops, and simulation exercise with response services and the national subcommittees, which looks at your infrastructure, your ability to respond from a social aspect, financing, and all those elements. Also, we continuously have our maintenance and inspection of critical infrastructure like your shelters, government buildings, roads, and ports, and these things would happen year-round because, as we know, a number of our shelters are actually our school locations. So we have our continuous maintenance program that we've rolled out for those locations to ensure that we continue to have our infrastructure as best as possible in tip-top shape, so we're in a position to be able to respond. And of course, last but not least, you have public education campaigns that happens about hurricane readiness as well as our evacuation plans, because given that the Turks and Caicos is a low-lying country, generally speaking, we have to be in a position where we know when and how to evacuate these areas ahead of time. And with the introduction of our regulations and law in respect to the mandatory evacuations that we would have passed recently. We do have the legislative framework now to be in a position to enforce ensuring persons for their own safety have to evacuate areas when they're high risk of any particular pending storm or any particular hazardous event. So I think that's something that was greatly needed so we can progress it, so we're in a better position as a country as well as the Turks and Caicos government for the ultimate safety of our residents.
Totally agree. Thank you so much. It's very, very important that we do that. And in the same breath, can you just elaborate on the strategic plans that are in place for physical development and the whole matter of planning, because these are two crucial areas as we traverse through this hurricane season? And then how do these plans really integrate disaster risk reduction?
Okay, thank you. So some of the strategic plans for physical development and disaster risk reduction, I've already stated earlier that we do have on the physical planning board a member of disaster management contributing, and that's a key thing, right? Because you have a situation where whether it's EIAs looking at the actual planning proposal itself. Funny enough, I have a number of plans that I have to sign off before this actually is for the next planning board meeting. So that information comes. Of course, we have our zoning regulations to limit construction in high risk areas. The one thing that I would definitely commend TCIAG and the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies over the years, we have done tons of risk mapping, flood prone areas and other risk assessments within the department as well as generally throughout the ministry, so we know what our risks are, so we can make these decisions in an informed way. So also we have infrastructure projects that can withstand severe weather, like reinforced shelters and drainage improvement works. And of course, as I would have mentioned previously, we're looking to do in this fiscal year, because we didn't get it awarded in the last fiscal year, a drainage program or drainage project that will cost upwards of $4 million, particularly addressing the issues we face in the downtown Provo areas and all the several other arteries across Providenciales and in other locations throughout the country, because of course, being low-lying and having built up over the years, drainage has been an issue and we have to address it. And of course, we have the periodic review and updates of the National Disaster Preparedness Plan. And last but not least, we've also, over the last several years, we've introduced the Informal Settlement Unit, which deals with what we colloquially call shanty towns. And that's something that we have to address, because you have structures that are probably unfit in some instances. You have access problems which can cause those areas which might not naturally be high risk just to be high risk for the way they were developed. So we have to bring all those things into the fold and actually make those improvements. So through the Informal Settlement Unit, a great deal of work would have been done. We've identified all of the informal settlements throughout the Turks and Caicos Islands, and we are progressing steps to have it either regularized or eliminated altogether, while trying to minimize any further expansion within our community. So with those various aspects, those are some of the strategic plans that we have for physical development and disaster risk reduction within the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Thank you, Honorable Robinson. Collaboration and coordination are crucial components of disaster risk management. Could you describe for us how the National Emergency Operations Center coordinates with various government and non-government organizations before, during, and after hurricane?
Thank you, Allison. So, before, the National Emergency Operations Center coordinates meetings before the hurricane season to align strategies. So you have the various representatives from across the Turks and Caicos government. So you have your DDME, you have your PWD, you have your police represented, you have the district commissioner's office represented, you have the deputy governor's office represented, governor's office, premier's office, immigration. All of the stakeholders come together as well as the private sector stakeholders like your utilities, telecommunications, and others, because all of those are important in any response phase to ensure that all of our strategies are aligned. So while the preparation and response is a yearly thing, and we might have done it before, you always have to ensure that going into any hurricane season, all of your plans, protocols, and everything are up to date ahead of time. So also you'll look at real-time data sharing during any disaster for effective decision making, which is, again, you need your private sector stakeholders to ensure that their infrastructure is resilient and redundant so they can be in place, whether that's from a power standpoint, even though you would have your backup power generations, or your telecommunication stuff, even though you would have your set phones and ability to communicate even outside of those things being done. But having the access to real-time data during any hazardous event is important. And of course, post-event analysis with all stakeholders to refine future responses. One of the things that we definitely can improve on as a country is to ensure that after any event, generally speaking, as well as a hazardous event, that we actually take the time to reflect on what took place, what we did well, what we didn't do so well, and where do we need to put the resources to ensure that it doesn't repeat in the way it happened previously. So the response to, let's say, a Hurricane Ike would have been one thing. Our response to Hurricane Irma would have been another thing. Our response to Hurricane Fiona would have been another thing. So that's 3 different storms over a decade and a half, give or take. And of course you have the other, Hurricane Maria and Hannah and all that good stuff in between, where we would have had responses. And from Ike to Fiona, the improvement over that time should be evident.
Thank you so much, Honorable Robinson. Are there any final remarks?
Thank you. The final remarks for the people of the Turks and Caicos that I would have is prepare, prepare, prepare. Disaster management is everybody's business, and it literally only takes just one hazardous event to change your life. Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Disaster 365 radio show, aired on Radio Turks and Caicos 89.1 FM. Today we have covered a lot of ground, from the comprehensive strategies our government is employing to the crucial role of the National Emergency Operations Center, and also the important role that we all play in disaster readiness. Remember, preparation is not just a responsibility, it is an ongoing commitment to safety and resilience. Let's keep the dialogue open, stay informed, and above all, support each other. We invite you to join us next week for part 2 of our conversation with Honorable Robinson, and as we delve even deeper into the mechanisms and the mechanics of disaster management and explore further actions to safeguard our beautiful islands. To everyone listening, stay safe, stay prepared, and keep thriving through this hurricane season with preparation and vigilance. See you all next week as we join Disaster 365 on Radio Turks and Caicos 89.1 FM. Take care.